There's always a force, so to speak, that opposes the logos. Always. That's the hostile brothers. It's a classic archetypal story. There's always Cain and Abel. There's always hostility between the two primary modes of operating in the world. So, and this is the modern manifestation of that. And it's partly a good thing, in some sense, because it's useful to be deeply challenged. It's good to have an enemy, because the enemy makes you think. The enemy tells you things that no one else will tell you. It's the adversary that stops you from being merely inert. And so postmodernism plays that role. It's extraordinarily critical, but things can go too far, and the motives and things can go too far. When they go too far, they reverse. That's what happens, and hopefully they're reversing now. Hopefully. The question is that the totalitarian forms that we've seen primarily in the past have been male, but maybe we're seeing something different now. I really don't think it's different. I think it's of a common kind that's expanded in its dominion. So you imagine that there's an essential feminine pathology, just as there is an essential masculine pathology. And the essential feminine pathology Freud mapped out. It's the Oedipal mother. And the Oedipal mother is the mother that gets too close to her children, right? And intermingles herself with them to too great a degree that in her attempts to protect them undermines them fatally. And so there's a classic representation of the feminine in the West, and the classic representation is Mary. And here's one of the representations. It's lovely, and it's derived, at least in part, from the story of Mary and the snake in the Garden of Eden. And so Mary has her foot on a serpent, and she's holding Christ off to the side, like this. Well, that's exactly what mothers have always done. It's a biological portrait of human women, is they hold their infants out of the reach of the terrible serpentine predator. Obviously, that's what we do. Well, that's fine, but adults aren't infants, and neither are children. And if you treat them like they are, you undermine them. You pathologize them. You turn them into old infants. That's an ugly thing. And that's the Freudian nightmare. You know, and this happens in therapy very frequently. I mean, you can be tangled into a terrible relationship with your father. That's often either because he was absent, abusive, or tyrannical, something like that. But the standard pathology with mom is she did everything for you. Well, what's left for you to do? Nothing, including never leaving. Right. And that's the motivation, you know, for the woman who's nothing but protective mother. There's no role outside of nurturant of nurturer of infants. Well, you just keep them infants. They'll never leave. They might kill you one night in your sleep, but they'll never leave. Sure. I mean, it's so comical watching the feminists, postmodernists in particular, rattle on about the absence of gender reality and act out the archetypal devouring mother at exactly the same time. For them, the world is divided into predators and infants. And the predators are evil and need to be stopped, and the infants need to be cared for. Well, that's what the mother does. But adults are not infants. And all you do is destroy them when you treat them that way, especially when they're adolescents and just starting to develop. You know, there's a rule that I attempted to abide by when I had small children, and the rule was, don't do anything for your children that they can do themselves. And that's annoying, that rule, because it takes you like 15 seconds to dress a 2-year-old, but if you let the 2-year-old dress himself, it's 15 minutes. Or 20 minutes, or half an hour, you chase them around the house. But if you let them learn to dress themselves, then you don't have to dress them anymore, and they can do it. And you do that with setting the table, and you do that with everything. It's like, no, it's okay, you do that now. Well, I care for you so much, let me do that for you. It's like, I don't care for you at all when I say that. I don't care for you at all. I'm going to stop doing everything I possibly can for you as rapidly as I possibly can. Say, well, that's great. That's how you work in an old age home. Do not do anything for the inhabitants that they can do themselves, because you rob them of the last vestiges of their independence, right? It's what you do when you're a manager. If you're a good manager, you make yourself superfluous by extending autonomy and independence to the people that you manage so that they can take over the whole job. You don't do that by doing everything for people. And you certainly don't do that by dividing the world archetypally and uncritically into predators, those who have more, and victims, infants, those who have nothing, and acting like all you can ever do is protect them. You don't protect, first of all, you can't protect people. You can only make them strong. That's it. You cannot protect them. You can make them strong, and then they can protect themselves. But then they don't need you. Right, and there's the underground pathological element of the devouring mother. It's like, never leave me. Here's the deal. I'll do everything for you. You just never leave. Right, that's sleeping with your mother. Right, that's the Freudian nightmare, right? You don't invite your child into your bed, right? You distinguish between them and you. You distinguish between them and your husband. And you facilitate their independence. A part of the reason why it's useful to have a mother and a father is because the mother has to fall insanely in love with the infant or she'd throw it out the window, right? Because they're insanely demanding and they're always right, right? Because the right way to treat an infant, especially before 9 months, is I'll do everything for you and you're always right and your needs take priority over everyone else's, and anybody that threatens you is terrible. Exactly right. But after, once the kid is ambulatory and starting to be independent, that's the wrong attitude. The attitude then is, get the hell on with it. And men who are less prone to negative emotion and less compassionate are much better at fostering that kind of independence. And so it's usually then when they step into the family and start playing with the kids, rough and tumble play, and pushing them forward and saying, get on with it, you can do it, you can do it. And it's very hard for a mother to play both those roles because she has to fall so in love with her infant that it's difficult for her to be like universal caregiver and disciplinarian at the same time. Because the roles run contrary to one another. And so now women have entered the political sphere, right, en masse. And so they're going to bring their essential nature with them, all the while saying there's no such thing as essential nature. It's like, yeah, there is. Do you have problems in your life that you're not addressing that you could solve? And the answer is yes. And it's an easy thing to figure out. You sit on your bed one morning and say, okay, there's some things that need to be done that I don't want to do, that I could do, that would make things better by the end of the day. What are they? Well, your conscience will deliver those suckers in no time flat, man. And then you might have to say, okay, well, how do I entice myself into doing a few of those? And if you ask, instead of trying to force yourself to do it like you're a tyrant and a slave at the same time, you can usually negotiate with yourself so that you'll start to sort those things out. Sort them out. Put your house in order. And then move out. Move on. So it's important because the thing is, you have a practice domain, right? There are things that are within your grasp that you could fix. Fix them. And you'll learn. You'll learn because it's harder than it looks. Fix them and you'll learn how to fix things, and then something else will beckon as another problem that you could fix. You all have your problems. What does that mean? Like, there's an infinite number of problems in the world. Some of them happen to be yours. Why is that? I don't know exactly. But you have your problems. Great. Solve them. One of the things I learned as a therapist, every therapist has to learn this, is because one of the things you wonder when you're first starting to be a clinician is how do you not take the catastrophes of your clients home with you? And the answer to that is because it's immoral to. They're not your problems. They're their problems. Like they're their life. Your problems are your life. You don't want to solve someone else's problems for them because you take away the deep meaning that's to be found in having them work through the problems on their own. And then you steal the credit. Well, I can help you with that. It's like, well, yeah, maybe, but I don't help you with the next problem then. So, in any case, you sort out the problems that are right in front of you, and it will make you grow very, very rapidly, and then you'll be able to sort out more complex problems without making them worse. So, we don't understand what we are. We don't understand our own consciousness. It has a quality of some sort. And it manifests itself within us. It's an orientation towards the good. That might be one way of thinking about it. Freedom to do evil, but an orientation towards the good. And so you participate in whatever that transcendent element of you is while you try to speak the truth and sort out the world. It serves as a guide. So I know that you're making a query about some transcendent reality, maybe the transcendent reality of God, but that's the best answer you're going to get out of me. Okay, 2 questions. What's my opinion on the alt-right, and what's my opinion on cultural appropriation? The idea of cultural appropriation is absolute nonsense. There's no difference between cultural appropriation and learning from one another. They're the same thing. Now that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that there's no theft between people. There is. You know, and it doesn't mean that just because you encounter someone else's ideas, you have an immediate right to those ideas as if they were your own. But the idea that manifesting in your own behavior some element of another culture, the idea that that's somehow immoral, is insane. It's actually one of the bases of peace. You know, one of the things that the various groups of human beings that exist have to offer each other is the tremendous value of their culture. You know, it's been really interesting to me, for example, to watch the response of everyone, but for this argument, for young Caucasian males to hip-hop. You know, there's an aggressiveness about hip-hop that's really attractive to young Caucasian males, and there's something absurd about the spectacle of the young Caucasian males taking on the persona of inner-city black gang members. You know, but I'm sympathetic to it because there's an aggressiveness to that art form that's a necessary corrective to the insistence that the highest moral virtue for a modern man is harmlessness, which is absurd. Women don't even like harmless men. They hate them. They like to claw them apart.